The idea of a second time skip has been around for ages in the One Piece community, and I've always sort of been on the opposing end of the argument, and I was going to make a video on it a long time ago, but I completely forgot about it. But it's good that I held off on it because there's been a lot of other good points that have been brought up, and I've thought of a lot more arguments against it. But to fully evaluate the idea of a second time skip, I do think we have to sort of dig deep, look at all the possibilities, and before you sort of hate on this video or think that I'm fully against the idea, I want you to look at all of my arguments and all of the points I make, and I do have certain definitions of what a second time skip would imply and what could qualify as a second time skip that might happen in the series. Now, why do people always argue for a second time skip? I would assume it's because of the fact that it seems like Luffy is so far from Yonko level. Everybody he's fought so far, he's sort of struggled with as far as Gear 2nd and 3rd go with. Gear 4th, if it weren't for the time limit, he would be able to potentially rise up to Yonko level, but that time limit kind of cuts him short, and for him to be able to beat Kaido or Big Mom within that time limit is unlikely, of course, and for all we know, Kaido could be even above Gear 4th. And then there's the fact that a lot of people argue that Luffy's just too young to be Pirate King. He's gonna need at least 5 to 10 years to be like a full-grown adult and to be able to actually rule as a king, the king of the pirates. And even Rayleigh before time skip sort of questioned if Luffy could actually conquer these territories. And of course Luffy doesn't like to conquer anything, but he does, if he is going to be Pirate King, he does have to have at least influence over these territories and make sure they're protected, make sure pirates aren't attacking these other cities like Dressrosa. And for him to have that sort of wisdom and authority at the age of 21 might be questionable for some people. And lastly, a big point that people like to bring up is that the Supernova, the Straw Hats, and many other characters need more development for the story to really peak. Many have argued the possibility of a new generation of Yonko between the Supernova, and they believe that the Straw Hats as a whole should develop a lot more alongside Luffy to be an actual Pirate King crew. Now, before we can even discredit the idea of a second time skip, we have to address these because they are very good points. So the first point is, can Luffy actually develop techniques that wouldn't seem too rushed to actually beat the Yonko or be on level with them in the near future? Now, I'm going to avoid sort of bringing theories into this, so I will try to use as many quotes and just examples from the story as I can. So to fully analyze Luffy's full potential and his current strength, we have to look at the past fights and what really happened during the time skip. When Luffy used Gear 4th against Doflamingo, we got a little flashback with him talking to Rayleigh about him being unable to beat a beast on the island Rusukaina with Gear 4th. He stated Kongun had no effect on this specific monster, so it does go to show that maybe there were animals on this island that were even stronger than Doflamingo and even Cracker. Both Doflamingo and Cracker were overpowered by the strength of Kongun, but this one beast on Rusukaina was apparently immune to the ability. And given the fact that Rayleigh was still there in the flashback, goes to show that this could have been early on in the time skip, since Rayleigh left during the 1.5 year point of the time skip. So if this wasn't even at the very end, it's possible that he was finding animals that were at the strength of Doflamingo and Cracker, only at the halfway point, maybe a little after that. So based on these ideas, it's possible that Luffy has even more up his sleeve, especially if he was fighting these insanely powerful animals that Gear 4th wasn't even working on. He developed King Kong Gun in response to these animals, but what Rayleigh said he wanted him to do was to develop a technique that did not harm his body or tax it at all, which King Kong Gun doesn't really qualify since it did cause him to pass out from exhaustion afterward. So given this information from the time skip, it is very possible that he has developed more than what we've seen so far. And even in the fight against Doflamingo, before he used Gear 4th, Doflamingo pointed out that he was very tired. And let's not also forget the fact that he was fighting using Haki against Chinjiao and many others in the Coliseum. And then he fought Doflamingo's executives and then Bellamy. So considering the fact that he used up all this energy in Haki, and even Doflamingo pointed it out before he used Gear 4th, does show that he could have a lot more up his sleeve that he couldn't use, which further strengthens the idea that he hasn't gone all out yet. But all this really goes to show is that his current strength could be a lot more than what we think it is. And clearly this shouldn't be enough to beat a Yonko yet, so now we must get into his potential strength. The only areas he can really expand on are his Haki and his Devil Fruit Awakening maybe. Now we know he isn't fully awakened yet, but we have seen him expand on his Devil Fruit, such as through the gears, and Awakening is sort of the maximum potential of your Devil Fruit, and based on what Crocodile and Doflamingo have said about Awakening, once you perfect the potential of your Devil Fruit, it's very possible that you could reach this state of awakening where you can begin to affect the environment and many other abilities. And Luffy has been trying to perfect his devil fruit for well over a decade, so it wouldn't be surprising if he could do it anytime soon. I doubt he needs a time skip for that, considering that it's not a completely new concept like Haki. And concerning Haki, there are some implications that he could actually train his Haki without actually physically training. When Rayleigh first introduced Conqueror's Haki, he stated that this form of Haki does not need training to actually improve, it simply grows along with your personality and your overall character, basically your spirit or willpower, so it's not something you train physically. So if he simply gains more willpower than say a Yonko, he could actually have stronger Conqueror's Haki than them. And given the fact that Conqueror's Haki is very dangerous, considering the reactions of the Admirals and Marineford to it, it does allow your overall Haki and spirit to grow a lot faster than normal. And Rayleigh said that this unique spirit of Luffy's is the only reason he could teach him all the basics in only a year and a half. And the fact that you can combine Conqueror's Haki with armament and other forms of Haki, as we saw through the Conqueror's clash with Doflamingo, this means an overall growth in Luffy's spirit could allow him to improve his Haki vastly over time without the use of a time skip. So with all of this in mind, it's not outside of the realms of possibility for Luffy to beat a Yonko without the use of a time skip. Now what I do think is possible is maybe like smaller time skips, maybe little tiny training montages for when he learns something new such as awakening. And this is a very common tool across anime. It's used very popularly in shonen and series such as Naruto, Bleach. I'm sure you all know of the Sage training and the Bankai training. Those were done within like the course of a week or so. So if something like that is used for Luffy, maybe by one of Roger's past crewmates, for him to learn awakening in say a week or so, that would not be impossible at all. One Piece is still a shonen, so we cannot pretend that everything is going to be extremely realistic, and this actually leads me into my second point in regards to Luffy not being old enough to be Pirate King. He's too young, he's too immature. These are common complaints regarding a time skip. Now, I don't agree with these complaints. I personally think that 21 is perfectly old enough to be Pirate King, or at least be on the level to be Pirate King. Now, this topic is usually pretty opinionated, so it's not going to be easy to bring up any sort of fact against it. But one thing you can say about it is that it would actually be very negative on Luffy's character to grow more mature and older. All the Straw Hats, including Luffy, have been consistently learning across the series. Basically, their lack of knowledge and maturity is what makes it so intriguing to follow the story with the actual crew. Even in Water 7, when Usopp left the crew and Robin ran away, we felt very understanding of the situation, and we ourselves really had no idea what to do either, and neither did they. And this lack of adulthood is what makes it so interesting and adds so much room for expansion for their characters over the course of the series. So if a time skip did happen to make them all older and more mature, that would be nothing more than a cheap way of maturing the characters, adding more character development without any actual development of their characters. Putting them into these very tough situations such as Usopp leaving the crew is what allows them to grow, and not time skips. That is just completely out of the question. The childish nature of Luffy is the staple of his character, so I'm not sure why anyone would want to get rid of that and make him older, unless it's at the very, very end of the series. And if you just want them all to look older, you might as well just save that for the epilogue. It would make much more sense than to just make them all older so that they can fight some Yonko. That doesn't really make much sense at all. Once again, what makes the series so interesting is the struggle they have each time they find someone who is way stronger than them, and Oda will always keep this struggle to make the series interesting, making them older and super strong just so that they can take out the Yonko. That doesn't really seem very interesting at all. Every time the Straw Hats hit a wall, they're not just going to go do push-ups on an island for 2 years, they're going to actually need to overcome it through willpower, strategy, whatever it takes, and that's very clear through the founding of the Grand Fleet, through all the allies they're getting. And the first half of the series clearly illustrates this because, for one, it was only like a few months the first half, and as complete rookies to the Grand Line, they were able to beat Crocodile, Enel, several warlords, and even take over several government buildings. So this recurring idea that characters in One Piece are developed through actual challenges and overcoming these challenges will probably stick the second half of the series. The only reason the first time skip was even necessary was because the wall was just too big. Oda needed some leverage to put them onto this whole new level, which was the New World. So in conclusion, is a second time skip necessary? I don't think so. We've seen through the first half of the series, we don't need these constant training segments. We should actually rely on them overcoming challenges. And in this case, instead of warlords and the world government, now we actually have Yonko and the admirals. So I hope my reasoning was understandable, and if you do agree with my points or disagree, write that in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe, and I will see you all later. Or whatever like that.